Alright, howdy folks, Timber Drifter here. So in this video I'm going to talk about doing laundry off-grid and shotguns. Two subjects you wouldn't think would be related, but it's what I've been working on lately. So if you're not interested in how to do laundry off-grid or how I do laundry off-grid, you might want to skip ahead till you see me hanging onto a shotgun, and if you don't care about any of that stuff, hey, we'll catch you on the next one. So recently I've run into a situation where finances were pretty tight. My car needed some repairs and wasn't really drivable. Finally put it in the shop, and I thought I wasn't going to get it back for quite a while, but I'm actually getting it back here pretty soon. So anyway, I ended up in a situation where I can't really easily leave my place I live here, and I needed to go to town and do laundry like I normally would every 2 or 3 weeks at the laundromat. Well, I have everything that I need to do laundry here. It just takes a lot of time, and I haven't done it in quite a while, so I had to kind of work out a system again. I have a double wash basin, but I need new rubber plugs for the base of it. I could plug it with washcloths, but don't need to do that right now. The other thing is, I live in a very narrow clearing here, and the sun kind of moves across and just shines right down into the center of it during the day. And if I'm sitting and working in the shade for quite a while, then all of the biting insects, the mosquitoes, the gnats, the no-see-ums will tear me up. So I prefer to be able to stay in the sun as it moves through the clearing. And since doing laundry this way takes hours, the sun's going to move and I'm going to move with it. So I ended up setting up on a wheelbarrow. So I'm not going to do a full demonstration here because, number one, all my laundry is clean except for one towel and a washcloth. And two, it would require me to have two hands to do that. And I'm holding the camera, which means it'll be a little shaky. So I'm just going to go through my process with you. Some might find it interesting, might find it useful. Unlikely, but possible. So let's have a look at that. So this wheelbarrow has holes in it, drilled in it. I got it this way, so it drains water easily. I had this old wringer. It functions quite well. The reason that this old metal milk crate is sitting here is this is where I stack the clean laundry when it comes out of the wringer until I have a big enough pile to go hang it on a line or throw it over a branch. It doesn't have to be this, obviously. It could be anything that would allow drainage. Plastic milk crate, an old refrigerator grill could sit across here. Hell, 4 sticks across the top of the wheelbarrow would work just fine. But that's what I'm using because that's what I've got. All right, so, and I'm using all harvested rainwater off of my shed roof you can see behind me there. So what I do is I fill this number 2 wash tub about halfway full of clean rainwater, put all the dirty laundry in there, and then I just take off my boots and socks, roll up the pant legs, get in there and just agitate. I don't stomp, but I just push everything around and agitate with my feet because I found out it was a lot easier and more effective to do that than what I'm doing right now. And you'd be surprised how even relatively clean laundry that you didn't do any dirty work in, how much stuff comes out of that. You don't see that when you're using machines. So anyway, I would do that for a while, agitate everything, and just kind of keep rolling stuff up from the bottom onto the top and stepping on it, moving it around. I used to have a laundry stick that kind of looked like a propeller with a handle on the top. That thing wasn't that effective and will wear you out pretty quick. It's easier just to take the boots off and get in there. So once that's done and there's a lot of dirty water, what I will do is, and I can't do this two-handed, or one-handed, but I'll pull everything out individually and just roughly hand wring it out and throw it in this other basin just to keep it off the ground. So I just get most of the water out of there and then dump the dirty water out of the basin into a bucket to save for watering my potatoes, which is I also do with the soapy water. The potatoes don't mind the soapy water. In fact, I think they like it. But I'm not going to waste the water just by throwing it away. So assume I have dumped this out. This is clean. It doesn't need to be dumped out, but that's what I would do normally. And then I would fill it back up with clean water and put my washboard in here. There, I think that'll work. And then throw a couple items in there that I'm about to wash. Normally I would use Kirk's Castle soap or Naphtha soap. I have some of that stuff. I don't know where it is. So I'm just using Dr. Bronner's, and this works just fine. When you're using the hard soap, what you do is you take it and rub it on here, on the washboard, and you see all these grooves here. They will hold that soap. So you're essentially just loading up the washboard with soap, but I just drip this on there. Doesn't require much. That's enough to do several pieces of clothing or towels or whatever. So now this is a washcloth, obviously, so it's not that big. It's easy to demonstrate. You can see it sudsing up there. I just work that soap into it. A shirt or pants, socks, whatever, you want to work the areas of that piece of clothing that gets dirty first. Work the soap into those areas. And what's really getting the dirt and grease and whatever else out of your clothing is moving that water back and forth through the fibers. Obviously the soap helps a bit too. So normally what I do is I keep folding the item to be washed and just catching all of those sides. So I'll do that for a while until the soap seems to be coming out of it. Another thing where the wheelbarrow comes in handy, you can hang your stuff on the handles. And then and it doesn't matter, the process is the same if it's a larger towel or shirt or whatever. I'll fold it over and run it through the wringer. This wringer has a shelf on it, on the bottom, that you can move around. That needs a little oil, doesn't it? So you can either run your wash water back into the wash tub, but once it starts getting dirty, I point the shelf this way. That way I'm not putting dirty water back into my wash tub. It runs into the wheelbarrow and out of there. So usually I'll refold backwards of how I had it, run it all through again, and then this is my rinse water. Put it in there, make sure there's plenty of rinse water in it. Hold it over the wash basin because I don't want to get dirty water back into my rinse water. I want to keep that as clean as possible for as long as possible. So a larger towel, I would fold and hang the end of it over this handle so it doesn't get back into the wash tub, and then fold it and run it through the wringer again. And I usually run it through the wringer twice. Fold it up, put it on the milk crate, go hang it up when I get a pile of them. Now, how I manage the water situation here is eventually this clean water is going to start to get dirty from rinsing washed clothing into it, and this will start to fill up from wringing out your rinsed clothing in it. So I will dump some of this off, or maybe all this water out of here that's starting to get dirty, dump the rinse water in there and start washing with that and refill this bucket out of the rain barrel. And like I said, all the water ends up in my potato patch, so no wasted anything. That's been working for me, and my clothes come out incredibly clean. If I had the time all the time, I probably wouldn't use the laundromat anymore. I can't believe how clean the clothes come out. It's amazing. So anyway, on to shotguns. So it wouldn't be a timber drifter video without a little pipe smoking, would it? So before I start talking about shotguns, I've been going through a lot of my stuff, putting away different things, getting ready to move some stuff to a storage unit, and going through pipe tobacco that I have no intention of getting into for years. I have a whole bunch of haunted bookshop jarred up. Cornell and Deal haunted bookshop. The light is not great, but we're gonna go with it. Normally, when I get haunted bookshop, I buy it by the pound and I immediately jar it up. For some reason, this one escaped last summer. I don't know why. I found it in a box. It was still sealed well, but I was happy to see it because this is the best box. Take the pipe out. This is the best batch of haunted bookshop I ever had. There is some variant. If you smoke it long enough, you'll find variances between different batches. Some of them have more bready Virginias or tangier Virginias, or the burley will have a little bit more of that chocolate burley flavor, or a little bit more of that ammonia, like chicken dung flavor. Weird to say chicken dung, but I'm trying not to curse on video. So this batch is from July 12, 2022. And this is the bulk of what I have on hand in jars. I had completely forgotten about this pound. This is one of the, I guess, advantages to having a poor memory, is pleasantly surprised every so often. So, in other news, my shotguns. I have a number of them, and I was thinking that I wasn't going to get a chance to do much hunting this year, if any, really. I haven't had a chance to get out fishing, or I haven't even put the canoe in the water this year. Hasn't happened. So I was thinking that I'd just take all the shotguns apart, grease them, oil them, wipe them down, put them away for the winter. But as I was going through a couple of them, I realized there's a couple of them that need the stocks refinished. And I have a formula that I've been working on for treating wood, like tool handles and things. And what are shotgun stocks but tool handles? I've tested this formula for a couple of years now, maybe 3. I had tried out different things alone, different oils alone, and then mixed together in different quantities, and I would paint them on pieces of wood, sometimes just doing that, sometimes applying heat to the wood and the finish, and then wait a while and cut through the wood and see how deep the oil penetrated and what kind of finish it left on the surface. And then the ones that looked promising, I left those blocks of wood out in the weather for a year. Well, I have come up with a formula that works pretty good. So that's what I put on the shotgun stocks. And that formula is equal parts pine tar, boiled linseed oil, and walnut oil. Now, the walnut oil, this is what I used to use when I was hand carving spoons and bowls and cups and things like that out of wood, because it's food safe. Well, it is food. I mean, I think they mean you to use this for salad dressing, right? But it's just roasted walnut oil. And I found that this really permeates wood. It really soaks in well, even hardwoods. And so I would use this for food safe items. But I find that combination, those 3 things, really penetrates wood, and they work well together. And then I add an equal part of terps, which is a synthetic turpentine. You can't really find turpentine around here anymore. But that turpentine thins everything out a little bit and helps it carry into the wood, and then evaporates. Supposedly. I think it does. So that combination works quite well. This is what it looks like. You can see the kind of amber color or opaqueness to the jar when the oil's been on it. That is the pine tar. The other two oils are pretty clear. If this was just pine tar, it would look like a little sludge of molasses in the bottom of the jar. So that's the four things mixed together. And what I do is I heat up the gun stock. Obviously, I take the stocks off of the guns and heat them up. This last time I used a denatured alcohol torch, which was good because I'd been using a propane torch previously, and it's pretty easy to burn the wood with a propane torch, much less so with a denatured alcohol flame. But I'll heat the wood up until it's almost too hot to touch, and then use an old toothbrush, dip it in the jar, and rub it vigorously into the wood until the whole surface is covered, but not covered so much that the stuff is dripping off of it, right? Just covered. And then continue to rotate that stock over that denatured alcohol flame until it gets quite hot, and that oil will begin to bubble but not smoke or burn, and then I set it aside and let it cool. And I might be able to get 2 of those in a day, right? Because you want to let that oil soak in. And you'll notice when you come back a few hours later that there will just be a slight sheen on the stock. The oil will all have been soaked in. And both of these shotgun stocks I was able to coat 4 times before they were filled up. And by filled up, I mean they wouldn't take any more oil. And if I heated them up, oil would start to come out of the pores, and I did that several times and wiped them down, and then I let them rest for a few days. Now, this shotgun is a New England Arms. They called this their turkey gun. It's 12 gauge, 3.5 inch chamber, and it came with, gun is clear. I should tell you that so you don't think I'm putting my hand in front of a loaded gun. It came with an extra full choke on it. That choke didn't work that well. I could never get it to pattern. I couldn't find a round that patterned well through it. What I ended up running on this gun is a light modified choke. But I've carried this gun. I think it wouldn't be a exaggeration or a stretch to say that I've carried this gun over a couple hundred, if not a few more miles. Just hiking and camping and grouse hunting. 12 gauge is a bit overkill for grouse, but I use a 2 3/4 inch 6-shot light loads actually. And what had happened over the years, New England Arms and H&R weren't known for their nice stocks, right? They didn't use good wood mostly. Every once in a while you'll see a pretty one. But the stain, they're cheap. They were cheap guns, right? They didn't care about the wood. The stain they used was more like paint, in that typically they didn't use it to bring out the grain, it just covered it up. And this one, with me carrying it, all of the stain had worn off to bare wood here, and the same here, from either my cheek or resting against my belly as I walk. And then most of it had worn off from about here back, with just a little showing there. So I stripped it, and then I did that oil treatment I was just talking about. And it was white wood. I believe this is beech. I'm not real sure, but I think that's what it is. You can see 4 coats of that pine tar came out pretty. And it's smooth and not sticky. And I expect if I left this gun out in the woods and came back looking for it in 10 years, if I just left it on the ground, the barrel and action would probably be a rusty mess, and you could probably just squeeze the barrel and collapse it. But the stock would still be laying there fairly well preserved, probably gray in color. Pine tar really works as a preservative. And those other oils allow it to carry in, and they're preservatives themselves, so it works well. Just a side note, a few years ago I made a video where I was talking about trying to figure out how to make a rear sight that I could put on here because I needed to raise it up when I was shooting slugs. Because what would happen is, even though the shot pattern shot correctly and directly where I was pointing, the slugs would hit, no matter what slug I used, the slug would hit 8 to 10 inches lower than where I was pointing at 25 to 50 yards. I was talking to some old timers in the gun shop, and they convinced me to try bending the barrel. And I think I can talk about this because I'm not going to demonstrate how to do it. Kind of. I think YouTube won't get too upset about it. But it worked. So what you do is you take the barrel off the action, just the barrel, you don't need the stock on there. And find a sturdy table and put a stack of 3 paperbacks under this end and 3 paperbacks under this end. And whatever direction the slugs need to be corrected to, that's the direction you bend the barrel. So in my case, the slugs were shooting low, so I kept the barrel on the stack of paperbacks straight up like it is now, and basically just did a chest compression like you're doing CPR. And I did that a couple of times, took it out and shot it. So it raised it up slightly. Came back in. I ended up doing it 4 times. And now the slugs hit directly over the bead sight. You can't see that the barrel's bent. You couldn't see that it was bent before. You can't detect it with the eye. And I think very likely it was bent slightly down before, and now it's straight. That's my guess. So anyway, the other shotgun is a Ithaca Model 37. We'll do this kind of like a pipe reveal. I got this gun cheap. Real cheap. One, because the finish is not in good shape from being out in the weather a lot. And the stock, the same thing. The varnish was cloudy and chipping off. You could take your thumbnail and just scrape a line of finish off of it. So, and I'll tell you more about that later. So Ithaca Model 37 is my favorite pump action shotgun. I've had quite a lot of different pumps. This is my favorite by far. This one is the 12 gauge Feather Light model. You see a lot of people on YouTube call them feather weights. It's Feather Light. This one has a 30-inch full choke barrel. And I can't show you it's clear because it doesn't have a loading port there, or an ejection port. This is a bottom loading and ejecting shotgun. I should really try to not talk with the pipe in my mouth, but what the hell. So this one was made in 1953. I was able to run the serial numbers and find that out. And the serial numbers on these old ones are right here on the front of the action. The newer ones are here. I think they're there. They're there, I'm not sure. Anyway, this definitely has that old school, well done American manufacturing that you just don't see a whole lot of nowadays. Ithaca Gun Company is still around in name and product. Not the same company owns them, and they're in Ohio now, I think, rather than New York. And their guns are far too expensive for me to buy one new. Maybe one day. But I've been wanting an Ithaca Model 37 for a long time. I guess I should show you the stock. This is just plain walnut. But it came out really well. Corn cob fore-end, lovely. This one's a little different than the other one in that, number one, it's a different wood, so it's a different color, but this also got 4 coats of the finish I was talking, the oil I was talking about, and then I also put 3 coats of tung oil on top of it. It has a slight shine, but not much. I don't like shiny guns. I don't like shiny stocks or metal. But I'd been wanting one of these for a long, long time. First time I ever shot one, I actually shot two the first time I shot them, was 2009. Was working at the cranberry farm, and a bunch of guys got together and had a clay shoot in one of the old gravel pits or sand pits. And one of the guys there had two of these. His had shorter barrels. I think they were probably 24-inch barrels. He had a 12 gauge and a 16 gauge. I'd never shot one before. At that time, I wasn't a very good clay shot or a wing shooter, either one. I didn't grow up with a shotgun in my hand so much as I did a rifle. More of a rifleman back then, and now I'm more of a shotgunner. Anyway, what ended up happening is I shot 4 courses with his 2 guns, and I'd never shot a 16 gauge before that either. And I couldn't miss. I'm pretty sure I hit every clay. I was on that day. You know, sometimes that happens with clay shooting. You're more on some days than others. I even shot a clay out of the air right before it hit the ground with my 40 caliber pistol that same day. Anyway, I fell in love with the Ithaca Model 37 that day. And he wasn't willing to sell either one of those guns. And it took me years and years to find one that was in the kind of shape where I could afford to buy it. There's a ton of used Ithaca Model 37s on the market. I don't see them that often, but they're around. And it seems to me when I see them, they're either really beat up or they're in like 90% condition and they cost a lot. So I finally found this one. And I found it at a local gun shop. I was looking around on the shelf, and like I said, it looked pretty rough. It has these blotches on the barrel where the bluing has come off, but there's no corrosion anywhere on this gun. It's just that the bluing is missing in these spots on the barrel. And the bluing has turned kind of a grayish color rather than bright blue. The wood, as I said, the wood was fine, but the varnish was in terrible shape. But anyway, I'm looking at this gun, and I'm thinking, oh, that's weird. It doesn't have a plunger. So I stick my finger up in there, and I can feel a shell stuck in there. And I couldn't dislodge it. I got my flashlight out, and I could kind of see the rim of a live shell in there. So when I kind of held on to the gun, and when the other customers walked out, I took it over to the counter, and I said, hey, man, there's a live shell stuck in this gun, which is something you don't ever want to hear in a gun shop. Well, it was fine. It was safe. There was no way anyone was going to dislodge that shell. It took 3 men, a boy, and a dog watching, channel locks, steel rods, and hammers and screwdrivers to get that stuck shell out of there. So there's no way somebody was going to dislodge it in the store. But even so, they didn't catch it before they put it out on the shelf. So it took us about an hour to get that shell out of there. Like I said, three guys holding the gun at different angles and tools and pounding on stuff. And when we were done, I was standing there at the counter putting the gun back together because they didn't know how. And I offered them half price, half what they were asking. And the guy said, yeah. So he filled out the paperwork, called it in, and I pretty much ran out the door right after that before they changed their mind. So I got this gun super cheap. And I am going to re-blue the barrel, just cold blue it. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But some interesting things about this gun. One of the advantages of the Ithaca Model 37 is that it doesn't have an ejection port. That's an advantage in some ways and a disadvantage in others. Obviously, for tactical purposes and in modern martial use of firearms, that's a disadvantage because you can't single load. Or you can, but it's more of an operation. It's not easy to do. But for hunting, one of the things that it's nice for is that lefties can use it easily. It's essentially, it's easy to use either way. There's no shell ejecting in your face. Also, it keeps the weather out. the rain and the snow and debris, such as around here, the primary debris that I get jammed up in my firearms is balsam fir needles, which are about that long and greasy once they get jammed up. And I've actually had that happen with a Mossberg 500 where I got so many balsam fir needles stuck in the action that I could smell it as I was shooting the gun because the heat was burning up the essential oils. So that's an advantage, is you don't get stuff down in it, unless, like this one, somebody goes and drills holes in it for a scope mount. Now, I'm going to plug those holes once I figure out what that thread pattern is, or retap them and put new screws in. But it's odd to me that someone would mount a scope, and I can't figure out any other reason for that, and I can actually see traces of small square scope mount bases over those holes, and those holes are about the right distance apart for the old Redfield rings and bases. So I suspect this had a Redfield scope on it at one point. The odd thing is that it has a full choke barrel, which conventional wisdom says you shouldn't shoot slugs through. I'm not going to get into that too much, but you can. I've tested that myself, shooting hundreds of slugs through a full choke barrel, and the barrel still measured exactly the same. In that particular gun, and that was one of these guns with a full choke barrel, hundreds of slugs. One of these New England arm guns with a full choke barrel without interchangeable choke tubes. The barrel measured exactly the same before or after I started that project as it did before. What happens is slugs are hollow, and they just depress and squeeze through there. In that gun, they were actually quite accurate. And another gun I tried that in, not as much. They weren't that accurate. So, as with guns and ammunition, it's always a matter of testing to see what your gun and your ammunition will do. But anyway, I don't want to encourage people to fire slugs through full chokes. I'm just telling you my experience. So I think it's odd that someone would choose to do that. And the other reason that it makes me wonder is that this barrel, although it showed no evidence of ever having slugs shot through it. So what happens when you shoot lead slugs, very many of them anyway, through a full choke, is you can end up with some sort of smearing of lead right inside the bore, and maybe even a ring. I've seen that. The other thing that happens with rifled slugs, which is mostly what's out there these days, you'll actually be able to see the tracks of lead inside the barrel where the rifling spun through. You'll be able to see the tracks of the rifled slug in the barrel, and it's quite hard to get that out of there. And I didn't see any of this in this gun. That doesn't mean anything. I wonder if he had a slug barrel for it, or a shorter like the Deer Slayer barrel, because back in the 50s you could order these. So I've been told. You could order these with two barrels. It wasn't common off-the-shelf option, but it could be done. And that shell that I pulled out of here, these are not live shells, but these are weighted shells that I used to train with my double barrel. That shell that I pulled out of here was stuck just far enough up in there that you couldn't quite load another shell. It was about that far. Like I said, these are not live shells. They're for YouTube, not to be freaked out. They're weighted shells that I used to practice with. So I think what happened is that shell had been run over, and the rim got deformed and a little bit burred, had burrs on it. And I think that guy got it in there relatively easy, but when he went to load another shell, he was probably really ramming on that sucker to get it up in there, and he just couldn't quite get it far enough to load another shell. And it took me a while, but I tracked down when that shell was made, and that shell would have been made, if I remember correctly, between 1969 and 1971. It was a plastic hull. So maybe that gun sat in somebody's gun cabinet, probably one of those old wood and glass fronted gun cabinets, probably since that shell got jammed in there. And it was made in 53, and it looks like it got hunted pretty hard for a few years. But the interesting thing about this gun is when I took it all apart, there's no wear marks anywhere on it. The extractors look brand new. There's no burrs, there's no wear anywhere on the metal surfaces. So I suspect this gun got hunted a lot and didn't get shot a lot. I doubt the guy was going out busting clays every weekend with it. He probably just killed with it or missed. And that shell got jammed in there and didn't know how to fix it. Probably went and bought another shotgun and left this one in the gun cabinet forever. Probably died and somebody sold Grandpa's guns, I imagine. So if there was another barrel with it, likely whoever was selling the gun wouldn't know that that barrel went with this gun. But anyway, these Model 37s are my favorites. I love the old ones with the corncob fore-end. Also, the way the controls work on these is just perfect for me. The slide release is right here in front of the trigger guard, and the safety is right here behind it, and it's easily on-off. In fact, in firing position, I can actually push that safety out of the way with the middle of my finger, which is perfect. This gun will slam fire. A lot of people think that's really cool, and it kind of is. But the way the slam fire works is the gun's empty. Pull the trigger and then work the slide back, and this gun has 2 sears, and what allows it to happen is as soon as that slide rides all the way forward into battery, the gun goes off. Do you hear the click? So you can empty a whole tube of 4 as fast as you can work the slide. Now the trigger's reset. Is that cool? It kind of is, but it serves no real practical purpose. And the other problem there is I've trained myself so much over the years to pump the slide, finger off the trigger, drop the slide, pull the trigger. I can barely get my brain to make my finger hold that trigger back while I work the slide. So it serves no practical purpose for me other than it's kind of fun. So is that all I have to say about this gun? I think it might be. One of the things people complain about with these is that they're difficult to load. I don't find that to be the case at all. If you've done some shooting and you're walking, so you're walking along hunting pheasant or grouse or whatever, this gun's too long to hunt grouse with. I tried that last year. It's like hunting with an old black powder rifle. It's too long to be busting brush with easily. But for duck hunting or quail hunting or pheasant, whatever, it's all good. So if you're walking along, you just drop your shells right in there. No problem. Flip the gun back over, you're ready to go. It's easy to unload too by depressing the little thing that keeps the shells in the tube. The other thing I found with this gun, shooting clays with it fast, is it's easy enough for me with the gun on my shoulder to just reach up and ram a shell in there. That's not a problem at all. That's not any slower than my Mossberg 500. And it's a little faster than the 870 because that 870 has that little kind of loading gate that sticks out that you have to depress, and I often would snag my gloves up on it. I like the 870 well enough, but I don't have one anymore. I want to keep this as my duck gun, so I'm not going to cut the barrel down. I think I'm just going to look for another one with a shorter barrel or one that I can cut down. This gun does have one action bar instead of dual action bars like all your modern ones. I've not found that to be a problem at all. And this thing is smooth, man. It is like polished glass. I never had it pump that smooth. And to be completely honest, this thing is barely broke in. I used to work with a guy that served in the Vietnam War, and he carried an Ithaca 37 trench gun. He said the first thing he did about 2 weeks in, was get rid of that heat shield and bayonet mount on it because it was just extra weight and it got hot. But he said in his tour he had no issues with that gun whatsoever. So he wasn't concerned about the whole single action bar business. One more thing. So this is an oddity also with this gun. I can pick these up. This is a standard 2 3/4 inch shell. This is one of those mini shells. These run in this gun. Obviously, they load right in there like anything else. And this holds 7 of these instead of 4 of the 2 3/4 inch. But it'll actually run them. And the problem is, it's not really a problem. I can't run the slide vigorously. I have to run it like this, which isn't a problem, and they'll load right in. What happens if I run it vigorously is that shell tends to tumble a little bit and then won't go in the chamber. But if I just run it about that speed, they run fine. I talked to a number of other older Ithaca Model 37 owners. They've had limited success with that. Works in my gun. Hey, I'm Timber Drifter. Hope you can get outside. In fact, why don't you turn your phone off and get out there right now?